Hello everyone, back tuning into part one of our summer 2018 Analogues update. So we've been teasing about the summer over the past few weeks. Back in January we did sort of a very early summer update when we looked at summers occurring in years ending in the number 8. Some very poor summers were included in that batch of years. We did the sneak peek, of course, last Sunday. So just to go over everything that we're going to be looking at through the course of the summer updates, and we included a few long-range seasonal models in the sneak peek as well. They generally were painting a pretty mixed bag, but of course very, very early days for the long-range model output. So we'll know more as we go further on into the spring, and we begin to get a clearer picture from those long-range models. But this is kind of like our first proper summer update. So we're going to have plenty of analogues for you to chew over and digest for part one of our summer 2018 analogues. What we're looking at for this first analogues update is we're going to focus on Februaries, actually. So we've just had a cold February, of course. The CET came out at 2.9 degrees, the coldest February since 2010. So we're going to focus on summers that follow cold Februaries, essentially. And this kind of like picks up where we left off with the spring updates, actually. That was the last sort of batch of analogues, really, that we had when we did the spring updates, looking at springs following cold February. So we decided to carry that theme on. So my good friend James Atquill, my analogues guru, has been trawling through the reanalysis again to get it all together for you, and we're going to present the information in this video for part one of our summer 2018 analogues, summers that follow cold Februaries. So have a sit down with a cup of tea and a couple of bits. It's going to be quite a long video, but if you can't watch it all in one go, don't worry, it will be placed on the summer 2018 updates and forecast page later on today, usually around 5 or 6 o'clock, with an extensive written summary, just going over everything discussed in the video. So, just say the study roundup will be coming up later on today, but it'll be released around lunchtime, and there may be a video this evening. We'll see how things pan out later on today. I'll have more about that, whether we are going to do another update this evening during the Gasworth Bid Sunday roundup. So you'll know then whether there's going to be a third video at the website this evening. But without further ado, let's get on with our analogues, summer 2018 analogues. We're going to begin just showing you the reanalysis for February 2018. So this is how the 500 millibar height anomaly looks for the cold month of February 2018. We find that we have a blocking feature to our north, quite extensive northern blocking, and then a trough to our south and to our southeast west. It's not a totally clear-cut cold pattern, because we do have this ridge through the central Atlantic and quite a deep area of low pressure below average heights around Greenland. So you have got a fairly strong Atlantic flow coming through, but a dip in the 500 millibar flow in the jet stream, in the 500 millibar flow, leaves us pulling down quite cold air from the north-northeast. That's particularly so, of course, through that final week of February. It did turn brutally cold, very, very cold, severely cold in the final week of February. Now, if you watch the analogues updates that we did for the spring forecast, you'll know that we was really struggling to try and find a February that was matching up to February 2018. We did come out with a couple of Februaries, though, 1951 and also 1981, and we carried those through to the spring. We're going to carry them through further now to the summer. So this is how the summer of 1951 looks. This is June 1951, which was a very unsettled month indeed, with below average heights to our west and a bit of a blocking feature around Greenland as well. So June 1951 was quite a poor month indeed. This is how July 1951 looks. A little bit better. We build up a bit of a ridge of above average heights out to the west of the UK. Interestingly, below average heights down there. That's very unusual for the summer. See low pressure moving into Spain and deep low pressure to the north. So quite an odd kind of pattern for July 1951. We would have been placed on the cool side of the jet stream, so it certainly would have been a heat wave month, but a little bit better when compared to June. And then this is August 1951, very, very poor month indeed. August 1951 was just this big area of below average heights, big trough, and the dip in the jet stream in the 500 millibar flow. That would have been a very poor month indeed. And then the other February was kind of like matching up in terms of the re-analysis to February 2018 was 1981, which again we included in our spring analogues package. Carrying that forward to the summer of 1981, we come out looking like this. So this is June 1981, where we have this area of above average heights to our west, blocking off the Atlantic, with below average heights to the east. Don't think that would have been a particularly unsettled month. It would have been quite cool because the jet stream and the flow would be doing something like that. So we're putting down quite chilly air from the north and from the northwest too. And that really continues into July 1981 as well. So we'd have, we've got below average heights to our east, got the ridge still there in the central Atlantic. And so again, we're placed on the cool side of a jet stream. And although not especially wet, because again we're blocking off the Atlantic, so not an overly wet signal, would nevertheless be quite a cool month there in July 1981. And then we go through to August 1981. It gets a little bit better then. So we do get an area of above average heights building through the UK and extending a little bit to our north. I mean, we're not talking about anything to be overly excited about, but out of the 3 summer months, that would have been the best. It would have been a reasonably dry and warm type pattern for August 1981, finishing the summer on a reasonably, I mean, we're not talking about anything to get overly excited about, not particularly hot, but would be finishing the summer on a reasonably warm and dry sort of signal. So I think out of the 2 summers, 1981 is quite obviously the best of the 2. It's much better than 1951. So what about the Central England temperature? So the CET for February came out at 2.9, which, as I said at the start of the video, is our coldest February since, or was our coldest February since 2010. Anomaly of nearly 1 degree below the 61 to 1990 average. So what our Analogues Guru James Aquila has gone back through the archives and has had a look for summers that follow Februaries with CETs between 2.5, so 2.5 degrees and 3.3. So all of the summers that you see included in the Analogues package from this point onwards will all be summers that follow Februaries that have CETs between 2.5 and 3.3. So this February 2018, is kind of like in the middle of those, two extremes. We've got 2.5 as our lowest, coldest Februaries within this Analogues package, and 3.3 is like our mildest. Well, you can't really call it mild because it's still cold and average, but 3.3 is like the milder, top of the milder range of these cold Februaries, and that leaves February 2018 bang in the middle at 2.9. So let's see what the summers are like that follow these cold Februaries. And we begin with the summer of 1900, right back at the start of the 20th century. This one has an area of above average heights to the north and to the northeast as well, with below average heights in the Atlantic and a little bit of a southerly tracking jet stream doing something like that with the flow and with the jet. I think it's quite an unsettled summer, really, but with that area of above average heights to the northeast, probably not a disaster of the summer. I would assume there were some reasonable days of summer weather, albeit the overall pattern is probably quite unsettled. Then we come to the summer of 1906. This is quite an interesting one because you have above average heights centering to the north, a northern blocking sea, which normally in the summer isn't a very good, it's not a very good signal, have above average heights, but somehow or other, that area of above average heights does extend down into west of Europe and kind of like blocks off this trough in the Atlantic. So I don't know much about this summer, but I assume it wouldn't have been too bad. I know that start of September 1906 had an incredible heat wave where temperatures reached 35 degrees, nearly 100 Fahrenheit, at the start of September in 1906. The summer itself, I don't think was overly warm, but I assume there would have been some useful weather in there as well. Then we go on to the summer of 1907. Remember, all of these summers are following cold Februaries with CETs between 2.5 and 3.3. So the summer of 1907, this one looks very poor. We've got this deep area of below average heights over the UK and Western Europe, a real trough. And then, of course, we've got the blocking signal going on up here, which I said it's not normally a very good signal. And this is a perfect example of why sort of a northern blocking in the summer is a bad signal, because we tend to park a trough of below average heights right underneath it and find ourselves stuck under a deep trough. And that's exactly what's going on there in the summer of 1907. 1909 is next. So interestingly how this first decade of the 20th century had a lot of quite cold Februaries. Overall, this wasn't a particularly memorable decade for colder winters. Actually, it's one of the milder decades, kind of similar to the 1990s in some ways, how we finished the 20th century with several fairly mildish winters. But it appears that they did contain pretty cold Februaries. And actually, the winter of 1908, 1909 was a genuinely cold winter. And this is how the summer of 1909 looks, very poor indeed, with below average heights again in across many northern and western central parts of Europe, a bit of a block in the middle of the Atlantic and trying to get up towards Greenland as well, and then quite a large blocking feature over there also. The upshot is that again we're placed on the cold side of the jet stream, so that would have been another very poor summer in 1909. Then we go through to 1924. Now, this is one of the worst summers of the 20th century, so quite alarming to see this one showing up within the Analogues package. This was a very, very, very grim summer indeed in 1924, with, again, I mean, you can just see what's going on. There's no real northern blocking signal, but we've got a very active Atlantic, a really strong jet stream is racing across the Atlantic, and just continuous stream of low pressure. So summer 1924, very bad and quite alarming to see that one showing up in our Analogues package. It continues through to 1930, the summer of 1930, also looking pretty grim here, with again below average heights very much centered around the UK. Notice above average heights, a bit of a northern blocking signal again up to the north of the country. There's a dip within the 500 millibar flow of the jet stream. So again, that looks like another really poor summer in 1930. Then we got 1932. This looks rather strange anomaly. We've got above average heights through the Atlantic going up to the north, with below average heights, a bit of a cut-off low around Spain and Portugal, which is quite odd to see in the summer. Probably not overly unsettled because we're blocking off the Atlantic, so nothing as bad as 1924, but I assume generally quite a coolish and fairly mixed summer in 1932. 1936 comes up next, and again this is following a cold February in 1936, and it all looks a bit strain, so we've got an area of above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. Then we've got quite a strong blocking feature over Scandinavia up here. But the main point for us is that we've got this deep area of below average heights again across the west of Europe. So with the flow and with the jet stream, we're doing something rather like that. And I assume, again, another fairly poor summer in 1936. I think there was a very wet July in 1936, one of the wettest Julys on record. This ridge probably would have been trying to bring in hotter air from the east. So I assume at times it may have turned quite warm during that summer of 1936. But overall, another pretty grim year showing up there. Then we've got 1940, so this is quite an interesting summer, because I think there was a decent June in 1940, but then there was a rapid deterioration through the rest of the summer. Overall, the anomaly places below average heights to the north, to the east and south, and then there's a ridge in the central part of the Atlantic, which is going to place us on the cool side of the jet stream. Not the worst summer that we've had within these analogues so far, by any means. This is one of the better summers, although nothing to get overly excited about, I wouldn't have thought. But a little bit better the summer of 1940. Notice that so far, however, we have not had a hot summer showing up, and we've gone to the middle of the 20th century now. No warm summer showing up at all. This is summer of 1954, and again, very alarming to see this one turning up, because again, summer 1954 was one of the worst summers of the 20th century. So, I mean, you can see what this summer is all about. We've got, you can't really make out the British Isles, but we're just there, and that trough is pretty much centred slap bang over the top of the country. There is also quite a blocking signal up to the north. Again, I say it's normally a very poor signal to get a block over northern latitudes in the summer. The 500 millibar flow is like that with the jet stream, so there's clearly a dip within the 500 millibar flow, and that's just a really, really bad summer in the summer of 1954. And as I said, it is quite alarming to see that one showing up within our analogues package. And then we go through to summer 1965. This is another very poor summer as well. Of course, the 1960s is infamous for its cool summers and also its very cold winters. And this is up the top end of the bad summers of the 1960s. 1965 was a very, very poor summer indeed, with again this deep area of below average heights, low pressure, not just over UK, across much of northern Europe. A strong jet stream is coming through, almost like an autumnal type pattern, and I'm not sure the weather ever really settled down in the summer of 1965. I think it's pretty much unsettled from start to finish. If there was any settled weather, it was very brief, very fleeting. And as I say, 1965, in a decade of poor summers, is at the top end of the worst summers of the 1960s. This one's a little bit better. This is 1970. Again, we're not talking about a classic hot summer, but out of the analogues we've been looking at, this one is rather a better summer. So you can see the reason why. Above average heights from Scandinavia, extending through the UK and going out into the Atlantic as well, which means the jet stream is pushed off up here. And whilst, as I say, it's not an overly hot summer, it's certainly not remembered as a hot summer, summer of 1970, compared to most of the summers that we've seen so far. This is quite a nice summer with a reasonable amount of dry and warm weather coming through. However, that doesn't last very long. We're off into 1978 next, and again, this is a very poor summer indeed. We have above average heights being centred to the north and northwest of the country, with below average heights down here to the south and to the southeast. I don't think it was a desperately wet summer, so that's one thing to say for it. But the thing about this summer, there was some very unsettled conditions at the time, but the thing about this summer, so it was a very cool summer. So, as I say, not perhaps overly wet, although there was wet weather at times, but the main thing was just really quite depressed temperatures throughout this summer. I'm not sure there was ever a particularly hot spell at any point, really, through the summer. It did settle down a bit in September and get a bit better in September. Actually, there was a very warm autumn, interestingly, following this really cool summer in 1978. That precedes the severe winter of 78, 79, of course. But again, another very poor summer showing up in our analogues. 1981, look at that. 1981 is a summer that follows a cold February. We've already explained that in terms of a reanalysis, 1981, February 1981 is kind of close to February 2018 as well. So this is how the summer of 1981 looks. We've already looked at the months individually, but just to show you how the summer looks, if you combine all the 3 summer months, you have a ridge of above average heights to the west, below average heights to the east, and again, doing something like that flow and with the jet stream. So, not a particularly wet summer, quite a cool summer, especially the first half of it, and then it got a bit warmer, a bit better in August. 1984 is showing up next, so now we're starting to get some slightly better summers beginning to appear. We've had 1970, now we've got 1984. This one was quite a nice summer. Again, it's not remembered as a particularly hot summer. It's kind of like crowded out by the summer before, 1983, actually. But summer 1984 looks like that, with the ridge very close to the country, below average heights out to the west, and we do something like that with the flow and the jet stream. I think August 1984 was quite a warm month. So, again, it's not a classic, but it's a better summer within our analogues. Then we've got summer 1994. Now, this is quite a decent summer as well. So, it's getting closer to sort of the modern, more modern time frame. We're beginning to get some slightly better summers showing up. You wouldn't really think it was a particularly good summer looking at the reanalysis, because we have deep below average heights up to the northwest of the country. But the main thing actually was this ridge of above average heights down to the southwest. And so we do something like that with the flow and with the jet stream. Actually, it was quite a hot it was quite a hot summer in 1994. Again, a little bit like 1984. It's kind of like crowded out and forgotten by 1995, which was one of the classic hot summers of the 1990s. But this one had its moments. It had a pretty hot July in particular, with several bouts of hot and thundery weather. It was a very unstable summer, though. The heat was never really sustained. Very quickly it would break down into thunderstorms, and it's you can see a reason why. It's no surprise with such deep low pressure up to the north and northwest. This Azores Ridge was never really able to get itself in. But nevertheless, it's probably the best summer we've seen so far, certainly from a temperature perspective. Then we've got 1996. This was quite an odd summer. And the reanalysis looks quite strange as well. So lots of low pressure around Greenland and to the north, and also to the south and to the southeast. Then we have this funny looking ridge, very weak ridge, out to the west. I'm doing something like that with flowing with the jet stream. 1996 was a reasonable summer. It was never particularly settled. There were some hot spells within it, but also some quite cool spells as well. So it's kind of like an in-between summer, really, in 1996. But it did have a couple of really quite hot spells of weather, especially early June, I remember, was really hot in 1996. And then we're up to 2010, which looks like this. So again, this is following the cold February of 2010. This was a really strange month, with above average heights to the west and quite a strong block over to our east as well. And then sort of a weak trough around here. Now, what happened in the summer of 2010 is that it was front loaded, so it had really quite a hot June. And then there was a very rapid deterioration from around the second week of July onwards, culminating in what was a very cold and very wet August. And then we're up to 2013, and this isn't a bad year either. So for 2013, bad summer I should say, we have above average heights again to the north and northeast of the British Isles and extending through the country with below average heights up to the north, and we do something like that with the flow and with the jet stream as well. Summer 2013 had that hot July. It's our last summer that had a summer month reaching 18 Celsius actually, so it was a sort of classic hot Julys. It deteriorated quite a lot into August, and June wasn't especially memorable either, but containing a really hot July, so we can certainly say that was a pretty decent summer as well. So as we got closer to where we are right now, clearly we see the summers picking up really from the 1980s onwards. We do start to include some rather better summers. If we combine all of those years, this is how we come out with the summer, however, and it is an unsettled looking signal. So very weakly, this is for June, I should say. So for June, very weakly, we get a bit of an area of above average heights over Scandinavia. But generally, we're unsettled. We have below average heights through the west of Europe and into many central parts of Europe as well. So unsettled June is favoured, but with the caveat that some of these Junes are building up a ridge over Scandinavia, which can sometimes be a reasonable signal. But this is July, and clearly Julys that follow these cold Februaries favour very unsettled months with a deep trough part over the UK, and also, I've said before, it's a bad sign, also hints of northern blocking. The 500 millibar flow has a dip, so the jet stream is to our south. And then we go through to August, and this is how August looks when we put all these years together. And unsettled signal again, perhaps not quite as bad as July. It looks like July is the worst of the summer months, really, with these summers. This has above average heights, high pressure to our west, with below average heights to our east, and that places us on the cold side of the jet stream. The only thing you can say with that is that at least we do block off the Atlantic to some degree, so it's probably not as wet a signal, but it is quite a cool signal. Notice again very strong blocking up there to the north, so still hints of northern blocking within these analogues. And then this is the all years combined summer charts. This is how the summers, all of them together, look when you combine them following these cold Februaries. And overall it's a very unsettled looking signal with below average heights, not just over UK, but over many parts of Europe as well. Europe is in for a very poor summer, if this is right. Above average heights are up here. Also, the Azores high is weakened, and it's out in the central part of the Atlantic, not doing very much for us at all. Do bear in mind that those summers get quite a bit better, however, as they get more into the modern era. So from the 1980s onwards, or even 1970 onwards, but it's not conclusive in the 1970s, 1980s. But as you get closer, these summers do get a little bit better. So that's the one saving grace, I suppose. But overall, it does look like it's a cool and unsettled signal for summers that follow cold Februaries. Just to add a little bit more to this, try and narrow things down a little bit more. What about if you combine cold February, so we have the cold February, with the mild January. So January comes out with a CET of 5.3 in 2018. If you was to look at summers that follow Februaries that are between 2.5 and 3.3 with their CETs, and January is at around 5 degrees Celsius, what you find, so there aren't that many to go by, but this is how the Junes look when you have a mild, essentially a mild January and a cold February. This is how the Junes look, and they don't look overly bad. We've got 1906, 1924, 1930, 1981, and 1994 in our analogues here. So, fairly decent signal for June. We have above average heights to our south and below average heights up to the north, which sends the jet stream up there. And at least for the south anyway, we get some reasonably dry and quite warm weather through these Junes. But this is how July looks for these summers that are having cold Februaries, but also preceded by milder Januaries. Again, it's the same batch of years. It's the summers of 1906, 1924, 1930, 1981, 1994. And overall, you get a big trough of below average heights centred over the UK. And then we have August, and this also looks very unsettled for August, with above average heights to the north, below average heights, let's change the colour, to the south of that blocking feature, and again quite a strong jet stream coming in from off the Atlantic. Combining those years and coming out with a summer analogue, this is how they look when you have summers that follow mild Januaries with CETs around 5 degrees and Februaries, cold Februaries between CETs between 2.5 and 3.3. This is how it looks overall, with below average heights over UK, and again bringing that jet stream through from off the Atlantic. Again, the only thing I'll say about that is that we have got a range of summers here. So at one end of the extreme, we've got 1924, which was a very, very bad summer indeed, one of the worst summers of the 20th century. But at the other end, we've got 1994, which was really quite a decent summer in a decade of good summers. 1994 was really quite a decent summer. It had a hot July as well. So it's all a bit inconclusive, but I think the upshot is that we're favouring an unsettled summer here, with the caveat that more recent years are at the better range of the summers, if you like. So they're still quite unsettled summers. I mean, 1994 is the best out of all of these summers, I think. And it was quite an unsettled summer. There's a lot of thunder, quite a lot of rain going on, especially in August 1994. So it's not remembered like 1995 is, or like 1990 is, or probably not even like 1997 is. But 1994 did have its moments, had quite a hot July. So if we was to pull off a summer like 1994, I would think most people would be fairly happy with that. But overall, these analogues do favour quite an unsettled summer, you have to say. Right, so we shall place this video on the summer updates and forecast page later on today, and there'll be a written report that goes with these analogues as well. And when we come to do the summer forecast, it's going to be the last Sunday of May. I can't quite remember what date that is. I think it's around the 27th of May. When we come to do the summer forecast, this will make up part of that forecast, because there's going to be many more analogues to look at over the next few weeks and next couple of months. The next batch of analogues I want to do is Easterly QBO summers, so that will be either coming up this weekend or next weekend. I haven't actually told James about that, so sure I'll be a bit surprised, but I'm going to hopefully get that up for you this month anyway, Easterly QBO summers. So we'll put all these analogues together in the end, and we'll combine them with the long-range seasonal models. The first seasonal model roundup will be coming up on the final Sunday of this month. At the end of May, we'll put it all together and we'll issue a forecast. So this will make up part of the eventual forecast that we release for the summer of 2018. Right, I hope you found it interesting and informative. Later on today, we're going to have Gaz Lovely's Sunny Roundup. There may be a video coming up this evening as well, so keep checking back for more. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.